everybody. For those of you who are watching on Facebook right now and joining us on our first Famous Friday of this session, we are going to be going over saints. So today, before we get into the actual saint that we are going to cover, I would invite you to pretend like you're watching a movie. Place yourself in this sort of like omniscient state, right, where you are going to be seeing somebody's life before your eyes, right? This is going to take place in about 300 AD, right? So as you're kind of sitting back and watching all these things happen, as I'm explaining places and names and this and that, picture these individuals, what they might look like, what the environment might look like. You know, even if you don't really know, like if you're like me and you have horrible geography, like go ahead and do some research afterwards so you can get an even better image. But right now we know we're going to be in Europe, right? We're going to be traveling between Rome and what is like modern parts of Germany and Italy and all this, that, and the other thing. So just keep those sort of things in mind. And as you're doing that, also pick out moments in this saint's life where you can either relate to or maybe you kind of want to strive for, right? Like maybe there's things that you need to do that you would like to do that they did that will help you better achieve more fruits of the Spirit. So with that, again, I say thank you. Bonnie is my moderator, so though I don't have a screen in front of me and I can't say hi to all of you personally, I do again want to say thank you, and she will be the one communicating with you, so don't be afraid to say hi to Bonnie. And with that, we will go ahead and start with our Saint Jerome for today. So he was born in 342 in a town called Stridon, Dalmatia. Jerome, whose actual birth name is Eusebius Sophronius Hieronymus. It's a tongue twister. He was born to a well-off set of Christian parents. At the age of 12, this young man was then sent off to Rome to study rhetoric. And rhetoric is actually the art of effective and persuasive speaking or writing. So typically those who were in politics and those who were in law were the ones that studied rhetoric. And while he was in Rome, he also studied grammar and philosophy. Now, he was taught by this famous grammarian named Aelius Donatus. It was from this man that Eusebius Sophronius learned Latin and Greek. Now, this is very important. So while he was in Rome, the young Eusebius did not live a Christian lifestyle, despite maybe popular belief. As a matter of fact, he was quite a headstrong individual and had a sarcastic wit to complement such a thing. Now, as he lived this lifestyle as this young, bold, sarcastic, and intelligently witty man, he did not necessarily, like I said, live that moral life. So to cope with such guilt of that lifestyle, the eventual Saint Jerome would actually spend a whole lot of time, they said every Sunday, as a matter of fact, in the Roman catacombs, where he contemplated death and hell. So imagine that, like you are in these catacombs after a week long of kind of just living it up, as they say in today's age, right? Like you are living it up, doing everything you wanted, just kind of all that feel-good stuff. And then Sunday comes, right? That day of the Lord comes, and we say, like we kind of sit back on the week, and he contemplated like all of the things he did, and just to kind of convict him and to help that moral compass stay sort of on track, he would stare at these tombs and so on and so forth, and he would contemplate death and hell itself. And he did this for quite some years while he was in his studies in Rome, which leads us to the year 366, where, thanks to a good Christian friend named Bonosus, Eusebius found Christ, and that is actually when he was baptized by Pope Liberius. Now, shortly after the soon-to-be Saint Jerome, he traveled to a place called Trier, where he could indulge in his now theological interests, more so than the rhetoric, and studied ecclesiastical matters at one of the schools there. Now, in 370, he then traveled back closer to home to a monastery called Aquileia. It was there that Eusebius met Rufinus. Rufinus was a monk who was renowned for his Greek to Latin translations. And if you remember earlier, when he was just 12 and he went to Rome, he learned from that renowned grammarian Latin and Greek himself. So now God has placed another individual into his life where he can now further this understanding of not just kind of the individual language, but now how to translate. And it just so happens that our very beloved, soon-to-be St. Jerome, and actually St. Jerome, developed a very amateur skill of this translation while he spent the time in those Roman catacombs by translating the transcriptions on all of the tombs that he would spend time with. So, now after some time in Aquileia, St. Jerome then traveled back to Trier, Gaul, which, to help you guys, if you're visual like me, Trier, Gaul is now what would be considered modern-day France, part of Belgium, some of Western Germany, and also part of northern Italy. So back at the time, it was just one big region that he kind of, traveled to. So when he went back to Trier, he actually had a goal and began translating books in hopes to kind of build his own private library. And a lot of these books were what we would call pagan books, right? They were non-ecclesiastical, non-Christian, nothing really focused on God or of Christ or of Scripture. They were just simply these philosophical, Eastern philosophical books and things of the sort, nothing that was really geared toward God. So, after 3 years, he traveled back to Aquileia for a very short time. It was actually long enough that he was there to have a falling out with his friend Bonosus, which was the one who helped him become a Christian, right? But it was then after that falling out that he departed for Antioch by the way of Athens. So he reached Antioch in now what is 374, and it was there where St. Jerome wrote his first literary work titled Concerning the Seven Beatings. Yes, that's exactly what I said. Concerning the Seven Beatings. Now, it was during this year, actually, that an illness had ran rampant through the town and that whole region, actually, and it took the lives of some of St. Jerome's companions that he was there with, and it also made him deathly ill. Which was, again, the medicine wasn't the same, way back when as it is now. So that was a huge thing. So while he was ill, as a matter of fact, he had a handful of visions, but there were a few that were noted that they said he had that really drew him closer and more devout to our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, the one in particular is simply the one that struck me that I found. And picture yourself, right? You are in this vast sort of area. There's nothing really to define this area, but this is a bright area and you see clouds covering you. And this is what St. Jerome saw. This was one of his visions. He's in this massive, very light, bright area, but with clouds everywhere. And standing in front of him is Jesus Christ himself. And behind him and sort of surrounding him is this council of angels. And between Christ and this council of angels, they criticized him for his focus on non-Christian and non-godly literary works. And after that criticism and after that sort of guilt that they gave him, they also lashed him after that as sort of his judgment, right? So then he awakes and he's very startled and he's very convicted after such a vision. And it was since that vision in particular that he never again possessed or studied any pagan literary works. So, now that he has experienced these visions in that last one that I told you in particular, he then actually became a hermit. He lived as a hermit in the desert southwest of Antioch for roughly 4 years. And then after he had emerged from being a hermit, Pope Damasus met him and encouraged him to be ordained. However, because we know our good old Eusebius, a.k.a. St. Jerome, who, though wonderful, was very headstrong, and he actually did not want to be ordained whatsoever. So, since the Pope had really pushed this on him, as well as some other higher-up ordained individuals, some clergy, he did indeed become ordained, but under one condition. He said that he would if he did not have to take up any ministry duties and could remain living his monastic lifestyle. Now, Pope Damasus and St. Jerome were very tight. They just had this wonderful uniqueness in companionship and in relationship. So he kind of became, Pope Damasus became this sort of protector, if you will, over St. Jerome. So he granted such a thing. So now, taking advantage of this freedom as a priest, Jerome traveled to Constantinople and studied theology from the renowned St. Gregory of Nazianzus. And in 382 now, St. Jerome now leaves after studying theology from the renowned St. Gregory, and he goes for Rome, where he meets up with, again, Pope Damasus for a council meeting of the church. Now, it was there that the Pope made St. Jerome his secretary. And then while secretary, St. Jerome had this ideal called asceticism, where that is extreme, like severe self-discipline and avoidance of all forms of indulgence, right? A very disciplined lifestyle, not indulging in any unnecessary things, right? Very humbled, very gratifying sort of lifestyle. And he preaches to all the people, including the Pope himself. So it was there during that time that actually a group of women had began to follow him in this ideal. They latched on to it and like really desired it in order to achieve another level of holiness. Well, needless to say that this didn't really settle well with most people, because it's like a group of women now following this newly ordained priest. So as time goes on, now we look to the year 384, where Pope Damasus dies. Right? Like, we know he's the protector. This is not looking good. So unfortunately, as you might think, this opens up such criticism now towards St. Jerome. And of course, due to his wit and due to his headstrong character, he made so many enemies because he refused to back down from his ideal of asceticism, right? So now, of course, after the Pope dies, so many attacked him. So many made these false accusations of him, of course, pertaining to the women that were following him. And again, they were striving to be holy, and they just they did everything they could to come at him from every angle to just put guilt on him and make him seem like a heretic and just this evil individual and Pharisee, if you will, of his time. So eventually, to kind of escape from this criticism and all these false accusations, St. Jerome traveled to the Holy Land. He traveled back to Antioch in 386, and it was there that he was actually met by his female followers, and one of them including our very own St. Paula. So it was shortly thereafter that they had traveled to Jerusalem. They then traveled to Alexandria, Egypt, and finally they settled in Bethlehem. There is where they actually had a monastery built. And yes, they did have female dormitories in there so that they could all live in a very respectful and self-disciplined lifestyle. So once there, that they had finally found this safe haven for themselves, this nice new, in the sense of new per 380 some, they had this new monastery where they could live a very, like I said, safe life now, devoted to God. So it was there that Jerome continued to work hard, and where he actually put most of his time into extensively literary works, extensively writing literary works. One of which, or many of which I should say, defending the virginity of Mary. And surprisingly enough, St. Jerome had many debates over the years on this topic, and others, of course, but he had these debates with other clergy and his companions. One of them, believe it or not, including St. Augustine. So it's just kind of crazy, because here it is, like, we see how human these saints really truly are, in that there is always this growth pattern. So now, of all things that Saint Jerome had done in his literary works, right? Him defending Mary, that very first one of concerning the 7 beatings, so on and so forth. Of course, the best one that he is known for, rightfully so, is his translation of the Bible from Hebrew to Old Latin, right? Which Hebrew, there's a good chance that both ways it was translated originally in Greek and in Arabic. So since he was taught Greek, right, and then taught how to translate Greek to Latin and Latin to Greek, he was then able to take this Bible and translate it from that Hebrew to the Old Latin, which again is wonderful, because if you continue to research some saints, you will find that our St. Augustine indeed then, throughout the years of knowing St. Jerome, had collaborated with him, and he was the one who translated it then from Latin to what we know now as like English. So without St. Jerome's works, we may not have what we have today, and or not had it as soon as we did. So amen to that. And a fun little fact on his translation of the Bible, he did this when he was actually Pope Damasus's secretary when in Rome, right? So very cool stuff. It wasn't just like something he did in a few years or he did overnight. This was half of his life type deal he put into translating the Bible. Now, Paula, what we know as St. Paula, and St. Jerome became very close. They both had that like very headstrong mindset of serving God and living this asceticist sort of lifestyle. So unfortunately, she had died in 404, and it was actually years after that, which that hit St. Jerome very hard. But again, with time things heal. But it was in 410 now, where Rome was overtaken by Alaric the Barbarian. And you're like, oh, well, that's Rome. That's not like in Bethlehem. But as it were, that violence and war found its way to Bethlehem, which actually had disrupted some of St. Jerome's works, quite a few of them actually. But him being the headstrong man that he is, he continued forward to finish what he could. Now, 10 years later is when St. Jerome himself died peacefully and found his way to heaven. And we have established that day is actually on September 30th. So his feast day is indeed September 30th, and his remains now also rest in Rome. So at first he was buried in Bethlehem, but those were exhumed, and at some point they were moved to Rome. So he is then the patron saint of archaeologists, of biblical scholars, of librarians, students, and of course, translators. So that is our very own St. Jerome in a snapshot. Again, I encourage you guys to comment, like, what stood out to you? Is there something that maybe you were anticipating about this individual that you never thought he would have done? Or maybe you just assumed that, like, he was well off, or maybe he was always a hermit or something, like whatever. Like, what was it that might have caught you off guard? And can you relate? Please share comments for even after this video is over for us to kind of look at and get back to you with, to continue on this conversation, so that indeed we can continue to kind of like see and better who we are for God through seeing how Jerome grew and bettered himself through and for God. So, well, with that, I'll give you guys a few more minutes to maybe throw out some comments and any prayer intentions if you have. That would be wonderful, that we could pray for and with you on. And I then bid you guys a most blessed and wonderful day. And I thank you again for tuning in. And with any luck, we will be starting a Monday, Friday schedule for some live videos just like this, and to help you grow in your relationship with Christ. So again, God bless you guys. We love you. Take care.